services, and we'll add that reference. So now what I've done is I've actually connected up to that web service that I've got running on the machine. Now let's go look at the code behind that main page. You can see here, there's very little code. There's two event handlers that are interesting here. There's this unnavigated to event handler, and this is the one that actually is going to get called when the page loads. And then there's the event handler for when I click on one of the items in that grid view. And you can see here, actually, just two lines of code. The first one, basically what it does, it's actually going to load the data from the web service. And the second one just actually binds it to that view grid object. The thing I do want to point out really quickly here is, I don't know if you noticed this await keyword. So this is actually kind of a cool thing. We've added support to the language and to the platform for these inline async calls. So if you think of how you write, how you write asynchronous code today, the thing you have to do is you'll make your call to an async routine, and then you have to set it up so that there's essentially an event handler that gets called later on or somewhere further down in your code when that async routine finishes. You end up with all this incredible spaghetti code, especially if you're chaining a bunch of service calls, because you jump around in the code all over the place. It makes it really, really hard to read. So these await statements in this model that we have here lets you write just procedural async code, which is a really, really neat thing and a really great way to deal with stuff like that. Let's go look, yes. Here's actually my routine. Right now I have basically everything commented out, but let's actually put that back in. I've got 15 lines of code here, and all they really do is, here, we'll get rid of the comment here. And all this really does is basically connects to the web service. It'll actually, here's another async call to actually get the expense, so it'll actually load those expense reports in. And what it does down here is it basically iterates through it and uses a little bit of Lambda expression magic here to actually split things out into groups that are based on this status field in the expense report. And then it basically builds up the data that gets bound to that grid view object. So let's run it again. And now you can see that we're going to load the data. And so here are my expense reports. You can see how beautiful that is. And this is all just about defining the right templates in XAML and actually binding the right data. There's almost no code that I had to write to actually make this work this way. It works with touch just the same way, just the way you would expect it to. I can tap on one of these expense reports. I can drill into it. You can see this really rich view of the details of the expense report. There's this pie chart on the side, which is kind of neat because that's actually a third-party control from Telerik. Telerik, you probably know those guys. They're actually, I know they have a booth here at TechEd. They build all these great custom control libraries for the various Windows platforms or the various Microsoft platforms. So that's a really neat example of using a third-party control. Of course, I've got approve and decline buttons down here, so I can approve or decline these expense reports. I want to show you one other thing, actually. Let me go back to Visual Studio again. And let's go look at that details page, and let's go look at the code behind it, because I want to show you something kind of neat. There are essentially 3 event handlers in here that are interesting to look at. Here's the one that gets called when I click the approve button. It doesn't do very much. Here's the one that gets called when I click the decline button. That doesn't do very much either. But here's the one I actually wanted to show you. This is an event handler that gets called when I invoke the share charm. And you can actually see how easy this is. This is the code I had to write to actually make the share charm work. And actually, there's more code here than I really need. Really, what it does is it checks if there's actually anything to share. And then it's going to call this share data routine, which all it really does is it takes this data request object and puts data into it for me. So all the strings that are interesting. So let's run that again, and I'm going to show you what that does, which is really kind of neat. So I'll go drill into one of these. I can approve it. And then what I could do is I'll just swipe to the side, and there's share. And now I've got share working, so I can share to email, for example. And there it says the expense report, the number of the expense report and the amount, and then I can just send it. I can just send that to myself if I want to. And, well, I won't do it here, but I can just, so there's just an example of wiring up one of these contracts. Wiring up search would be just as easy. It's super trivial to do. Let me show you one last thing before we stop here. If you're a developer, you might not have access to a whole bunch of different hardware. You might not have, say, a tablet to play with that has, a rotatable form factor. You might not have a giant high resolution or high density screen or something like that, but you want to make sure your app works in all those different kind of form factors and environments. So one of the neat things in Visual Studio is this simulator that lets me actually simulate different kinds of hardware. So I'm going to run the app again, but this time I'm running it in the simulator. So there's my simulator. So let's actually, I can change it. Whoops, I can change the resolution here. Let's go to this, which actually matches the resolution of the device I'm running on. And I can do things like simulate a rotation, and I can see that my app actually relays out properly. I'll rotate it back. I can go to a much higher resolution screen, for example, and I can see that my app actually lays out properly. And this is my app running in the simulator. In fact, I can simulate touch gestures and things like that. I can go, I can go approve my expense report. I can swipe from the side if I do this carefully and bring out the charms and all those things. So this is the app just running in that simulator. And it's actually a great tool for letting you make sure that your app reacts properly to all these different things like the screen resolution and screen orientation changes. So that's it for my Visual Studio demo. Thanks for actually sitting in your chairs. So again, the main point here, we only scratched the surface, but the main point here is that all this stuff is going to be incredibly familiar to you. And that gives you a huge head start in writing Windows 8 apps. So Linda's going to come out again, and she's going to talk to us now about how you deploy and manage apps on a Windows 8 desktop. Linda?
Thank you. So what I have here is an ARM device, ARM tablet, running Windows 8. This is a tablet that we're using inside Microsoft to actually test Windows 8 on ARM. We're all familiar with why you would want an ARM system, tablet, PC, either one. Long battery life, low power consumption, highly mobile. But there's more. With any Windows 8 ARM tablet, you have trusted boot. So we establish a root of trust with the hardware using UEFI secure boot. And then we validate all code, we verify it in the boot path before it actually runs. And there's more. With all Windows 8 ARM tablets, device encryption is always on. It's powered by BitLocker. And don't forget, the app model for Metro-style apps is actually geared at producing apps that don't change the state of the machine. So this all combines to give you a very robust tablet that you can actually use and have a lot of confidence about what's on it and what the state of that actual machine is. But there's still more. You can use the same management infrastructure that you're used to using today to actually manage the device. You can make available applications to be deployed, and I'm going to show you how to do the deployment here in just a second. But you can do things like you can enable or disable convenience logon. You can set the number of complex characters in the password. You can check things like the status of auto update, all of those types of things that you're used to doing. And you can provision or you can deprovision the system if you actually want to take it out of use. So these are things that are, we think, very, very convenient to give you some confidence to let either your employees bring these personal devices into the enterprise to use, or to use them yourselves in an application that I'm going to call typically kind of a vertical application. I'm going to show you an example of one of those. So let me move around to the system I'm going to actually demo on here. And I'm going to now log in. Now this time, and by the way, that image that you've been, I have to brag just a little, the image you've been seeing, the cute little girl hugging up on the horsey, that's my 2.5-year-old granddaughter. And this lovely little girl here is my 1-year-old granddaughter, and I'm going to use her to log in. And so I'm now on my start screen. So there are actually several ways you can get applications, Metro-style applications, onto any Windows 8 ARM tablet. You see, I have the store here, and so you can install from the store. There are business applications on the store that go out broadly, so that's one choice. You notice that I have an RDP app here, so there is a Metro-style RDP client. So in an enterprise, you can actually use that to enable folks using your Win 8 ARM tablets to actually go back to a server that you're running and use any kind of business apps that you want to make available to them. Or you can actually install your own Metro-style applications onto the ARM tablet. So I'm going to show you that. And so I have previously connected to the management infrastructure, and my machine was provisioned to be able to install apps. And so you can see that at that time, this application was put on my system. It's really just a portal into the Metro-style applications that the IT group would think I would want to actually use on my system. I'm actually going to install 2 of them. So I'm going to install the finance app, which we've showed you a couple of times today. And then I'm going to install Rooms to Go. So it's actually quite that simple. Now, you have to do 2 things before you can install an application, a Metro-style application, on a Windows 8 ARM tablet. So first, it must be signed by a known trust authority, or you need to put the cert on the box, and you can do that with your management infrastructure as well. And you need to the app needs to pass the Windows Application Certification Kit, which we affectionately call the WAC. So you need to run the WAC on your apps. We run the WAC on the apps when they onboard to the store as well. And this is to help ensure, this is part of how we help ensure the fact that these applications, in fact, do honor the design principle of you don't change the state of the machine. So I installed 2 applications, and they will install at the end of the start screen. Now, I've showed you the finance app before, so I'm not going to show it again, but I am going to show you Rooms to Go. So Rooms to Go is an IT shop. They have an application running on Windows 7 tablets today. This is a showroom floor. Salesman carries the tablet around, interacts with the customers, doesn't have to leave customer and go back to his office, things like that. So lets them make more money. So they have this application today. They were able to move quite readily to Windows 8 because they could reuse their XAML skills, they could reuse their C# skills, and they could connect to the exact same back end. So it was actually quite straightforward for them to actually move to a Windows 8 Metro-style app. And now they can actually take advantage of all of the new form factors, both, by the way, ARM and x86. And if any of you went to Computex or you actually have read any of the press about it, our hardware partners began to show their new form factors, their new tablet form factors, and they showed both ARM and x86 Win 8 tablets at Computex. So I have the Rooms to Go app up here, and I think you can get the gist of how it actually works. So I'm on the showroom floor all day long. I take a bunch of orders. You know, I have some of them in my cart. I've been doing it. And so there's more. So at the end of the day, I think, I should probably check my inventory and make sure that I can actually fulfill all those orders. And so, check this out. So I'm going to go back to the start screen, and I'm going to go to the desktop. Because on Windows 8,